A teenager in Delhi claimed to be God. Within 5 years, he had 1 million followers. Within 10, he owned a media empire. I've read the testimony logs myself, stacks of them, filed away in archives most people never visit. What struck me wasn't the certainty in the followers' voices. It was the precision. They could tell you the exact date they first saw him, the exact moment they believed. November 1960. That's when Prem Rawat was born, not just as a person, but as a movement. His father, Shri Hans Jai Maharaj, had already built a small spiritual following in northern India, but when Hans died that year, something unexpected happened. The followers didn't scatter. They turned to his youngest son. Prem was 8 years old. 8. His mother began presenting him as the reincarnation of his father, the divine successor. Now you have to understand what I mean by divine in this context. Not metaphorical, not inspirational. Literal, the living embodiment of God on earth. By 1966, he was calling himself Maharaji, the great king. He was giving sermons. Thousands were coming. What his followers didn't know yet, and this is crucial, was that they were witnessing the birth of something far larger than a regional cult. They thought they'd found enlightenment. They were actually walking into a machine that would eventually span 4 continents. By 1968, Maharaji had consolidated power in India. He was 14. He'd appointed himself as the perfect master, a being beyond karma, beyond reincarnation, beyond the need for spiritual growth. His followers called him Babuji. They prostrated before him. They gave him their money, and critically they gave him their testimonies, personal stories of transformation that he could weaponize. Then came the move that changed everything. In 1971, Maharaji decided India wasn't enough. He needed the West. He sent his mother and supporters ahead to Britain and America with a simple mission. Find the seekers, the disillusioned, the spiritually hungry. Find them and bring them to him. The timing was perfect. I've studied the historical record. This was the tail end of the 60s spiritual boom. Young people were searching for meaning outside traditional religion. Eastern mysticism had cash. Transcendental meditation was mainstream. Into that hunger stepped Maharaji's people, offering something simpler, direct contact with God, not meditation, not philosophy, a person. By 1973, he'd arrived in America himself. 22 years old, he rented the Houston Astrodome, a 70,000-seat stadium, and announced a World Peace Festival. The event was a financial disaster, but it wasn't about the money. It was about the myth, the photographs, the narrative. A young master had come to save the West. What the attendees didn't realize, and I want to emphasize this gap in understanding, was that they were watching the launch of a sophisticated recruitment apparatus. This wasn't spontaneous spirituality. It was engineered. Maharaji had studied his father's methods. He'd refined them. He understood psychology, charisma, and the power of exclusivity. The core practice was called knowledge. Initiates would receive secret meditation techniques, supposedly revealed by Maharaji himself, that would grant them direct experience of the divine light. The techniques were simple. Some involved focusing on the light in your eyes, others inner sound, but the power wasn't in the technique. It was in the promise. You alone have been chosen to receive this. By 1974, he had thousands of Western followers. They called themselves the Divine Light Mission. They wore buttons, they distributed pamphlets, they tithed. Some gave up their homes. Some severed family ties. And Maharaji, living in a mansion in Malibu, began collecting the infrastructure of empire, real estate, media companies, a publishing arm. I've interviewed former members about this period. What they describe is a carefully calibrated system of control wrapped in the language of love. Followers were encouraged to cut ties with skeptics, family, old friends. They were told that spiritual progress required surrender, not just mental surrender, financial, physical, total. By the late 1970s, the Divine Light Mission owned radio stations, television production facilities, and a magazine with a circulation in the hundreds of thousands. Maharaji had married his secretary, a woman his followers had been instructed would be his future bride. The wedding cost millions. The followers paid for it. But something was shifting. Journalists began investigating. Former members, disillusioned, traumatized, started speaking publicly. They described sleep deprivation during intensive retreats, emotional manipulation, sexual coercion by senior leaders. The narrative of divine light began cracking. By 1980, Maharaji was in damage control. He disbanded the Divine Light Mission as a formal organization, though the followers remained. He shifted his messaging. No longer the perfect master. Now he was simply a teacher. He moved away from the spiritual apparatus and towards something more palatable: motivational speaking, business seminars, self-help. What's remarkable, and this is what I found most unsettling in the archives, is that he never apologized. never acknowledged the harm. He simply rebranded. The followers who remained accepted the pivot. They'd invested too much. Their identity was fused with his. Today, Maharaji still operates. His organization, now called Words of Peace Global, maintains a presence in dozens of countries. He's given keynote addresses at international conferences. He's been interviewed by mainstream media. Many people know nothing of the Divine Light mission's past. They see only the polished present. The survivors, the ones who escaped, who deprogrammed, who rebuilt their lives, they remember differently. They remember the pressure, the shame, the years it took to recognize that enlightenment and exploitation aren't opposites. They're often the same mechanism wearing different masks. The Divine Light mission teaches us something uncomfortable about how cults operate. They don't announce themselves as traps. They offer light. They promise transformation. They provide community. And by the time you realize the light was always just a reflection of the leader's ego, you've already surrendered too much to leave easily. Subscribe for the next deep dive into how belief systems fracture under scrutiny, new investigations every week.